how to resign from your investment banking job without burning bridges. Congratulations, you've gotten your dream PE offer or whatever it is that you wanted to do, and you have officially, successfully made it out of investment banking. Before you go celebrate, pop champagne, get wasted, pop champagne in celebration, and tell everyone, before you start your transition, there are a few key things that you need to do. It may seem as simple as just handing in your 2 weeks notice. Maybe you can just stop showing up and people will catch on that you're never coming back. But what is the most tasteful and tactful way to do so in order to maintain these connections that you have made over the past 2, 3, 4 years? First of all, of course, make sure that you have another offer in your hand. As tempting as it may be, I know it can get really, really rough on this job sometimes. Make sure you have something lined up before you decide to hand in your notice. Try to avoid a situation where you are leaving without some sort of plan going forward and you are trying to recruit full-time and just having a couple months without an income unless you can really afford to do so. It will make your life a lot less stressful, and as hard as it is to recruit while you're still on the job, because everyone knows that it's very difficult to be doing modeling tests and interviews while you're still working an 80 to 100 hour job, but do try your best to have something lined up. And I wouldn't call it a mistake necessarily, but let's just say that it's been half a year right now and they're still looking. But again, everyone's journey is a little bit different, so that might not be the case for you. I would just always opt for the option where you already have something lined up. Now that you have a signed offer in your hand, are you ready to hand in your 2 weeks notice? The answer is no. Just hold on for just 1 week, maybe 2 weeks max. Make sure you have that signed offer in your hand. Make sure the HR department at your new employer has received it, and also make sure that all of your background checks have passed. In short, make sure that everything has been finalized and received and completely set in stone before handing in your 2 weeks notice. You never want to be caught in a situation where you've already handed in your 2 weeks and for whatever reason your background check does not check out. Also, make sure you get confirmation from your new employer before you proceed forward. This is very standard practice amongst HR, so this shouldn't be a big deal for them. Just getting confirmation in writing, not verbally, not through text or whatever medium. Make sure that you have physical evidence that everything has been received and finalized on their end, and that there is basically no going back on this offer because that they have promised you. Additionally, if you're planning to wait until you receive your year-end annual bonus, make sure that bonus hits your bank account before you decide to leave. You never really know what little tricks are up their sleeve, or them saying that your end date was different than it actually was and basically depriving you of a bonus when you worked 100% of the year that you were supposed to. In general, just try to always err on the side of caution, because when it comes down to it, you're just an individual and they're a huge institution. Just make sure that numerical number is already in your bank account before communicating anything. Basically, what I'm saying is you never really know, so just to be extra safe, make sure your bonus has already been in your bank account and isn't pending. It has already been fully transacted. So what is the procedure really like? When you hand in your 2 weeks notice, do you actually work the 2 weeks? Are you asked to leave immediately? And the answer to that is that it depends. If you're leaving for a competitor, they might ask you to leave immediately because they don't want you to continue accessing confidential documents for your current bank that you're at. So they might ask you to leave just for compliance reasons. Also, just be aware that if you leave to a competitor, the last, say, couple months of your emails, your chats, everything that's on record will be carefully reviewed. In some cases, even if you're not leaving for a competitor, they will ask you to leave ASAP. You will probably not have access to the building or your belongings. So just make sure to plan ahead. If you're physically going into the office, if you don't want to raise suspicions, maybe take a couple items home at a time every day, or make sure to go in on the weekends as you pack your stuff to make sure you're not, leaving behind something important in the office. Just always operate under the assumption that they're going to tell you to leave immediately, and just making sure you have all the context that you need from people you actually want to stay connected with, that you've picked up everything from the office, etc. However, they might actually ask you to stay the 2 weeks. Also, just make sure you do your research and check to see what the standard amount of leave is appropriate for your bank. It could vary. The standard is typically 2 weeks. That is something to double check. Should you always hand in a 2 weeks notice? If you don't want to burn bridges, yes, make sure you at least give them the courtesy notice of, hey, I'll be leaving in X amount of weeks, so that they are prepared for that and they can start trying to get you rolled off of certain accounts or projects so someone else can take that over and that the transition is smooth. Yes, sometimes you do have to work those 2 weeks, and that was the case in my experience. They definitely got the last few ounces of labor out of me, is what I'm gonna say. It was a little bit unfortunate because it felt like any other work week where I was staying up till 1 or 2 a.m. every single day, but it really shows that your commitment to make the transition as smooth as possible, and you're not just dropping everything and leaving your current employer. So it's just kind of like a polite thing to do. Did you tell people where you're going? General rule of thumb is no. Please don't tell anyone where you're going. The finance industry is extremely small, and you don't want word to be getting out until you've already started, because honestly you never know what people are going to do unless you're extremely close to this person and you know that they're going to keep their mouth shut. Bad things probably won't happen unless you royally piss someone off, but you just never know what type of selfish or petty things that people might do when they're not necessarily pleased with the fact that you're leaving, especially if it's for like a competitor or you're leaving for reasons that may not be as commonly accepted. Yeah, basically the finance industry and people in investment banking are very well connected, so just make sure that you're still putting in the work during your last few months, that you don't tell people where you're going until you've already started. And if they ask you, and which they will, you could say something like, will reach out to you when I've started, or I've gotten advice from more seasoned bankers who I consider mentors to not tell anyone where I'm going. I'm going to take their word for it. Yeah, just try to keep it as contained as possible. I will also include some articles that were really helpful for me. I was very particular about the process, and I wanted to make sure that I was taking particular caution with every single step and not to leave any loopholes for anything that might happen that could affect my future employment. Long story short, unless you have a very good relationship with the people in your group or the people that you're telling, never tell people where you're going unless you've already started, and they can find out on LinkedIn anyways, or they'll hear about it. Word spreads extremely fast, so chances are if you tell a handful of people, everyone else will know as well, even if you say, let's just keep it between us. Tends to not be the case. So how exactly do you go about communicating your 2 weeks? You should tell the most senior people first, and that will be your managing directors in most cases. The reason for that is you don't want them to be finding out last, because that just really isn't a good look and they might not have a great impression of you. You will also have to communicate to your resource manager, who will basically facilitate the rest of the process with HR, where you might have an exit interview, you will have some leave tasks that you need to do before you're able to fully leave the company. They'll probably ask for like your contact details for you to schedule an exit interview, just things like that, and I think it kind of varies. I would always err on the side of communicating with the most senior people first, the most important ones, and then asking them for advice on how you think it's best to transition and how you should be communicating with the team members. It's just like a sign of respect for them to know first, and basically show that you are willing to do whatever it takes to make the transition very smooth in your absence, so that people aren't looking for files that they can't find because you were the only one working on it, or they know where things are located and who should be taking over what you had previously been working on. Now, once all this is figured out, you've handed in your 2 weeks, you've done your time, you've said your goodbyes, it's always nice to have some thank you email. And again, communication here is key, and what you say should be in the light of thankful. Show that you're appreciative for your time at the bank. This is not your chance to really air out the dirty laundry or to be sarcastic or put something snarky in it, even if your experience was less than pleasant. This is not the time to seek minor ways of vengeance. Again, let's just be tasteful and tactful about it. Even if your experience wasn't great, you just keep it short. Like, thank you for the mentorship, guidance, and support I've had over the past X amount of years. Look forward to keep in touch, and your contact details. It can be as simple as that. Next thing to do, and this is what I decided to do, is to call up the people who have been important and been significantly involved over your time at the bank. What I did was I had a list of people who I wanted to call and just make sure that they heard from me personally rather through the grapevine that I was planning to leave. All of the conversations went very well, and they really appreciate the fact that I had personally went out of my way to reach out to them specifically how I structured these calls was I sent them a quick email asking if we could catch up for 5 to 10 minutes. And once you send that, I think they kind of have an inkling of what's going to happen. If you're in the office, find a time to step into their office and tell them personally. I know it's extremely daunting, but it's also a way of having that closure. And honestly, this is something that my mentor told me, but everyone should be supportive of you. And if you're not, that's just more of a reason to not keep in touch with that person and further confirms your decision for leaving. I would tell them how much I appreciated my time working with them, maybe name some specific things that really differentiated them to me. For example, there was a managing director who I found to be very approachable, just like a very normal guy, very sane, which, you know, is less common than you'd imagine. And I basically thanked him for everything that he got me involved with, because I learned a lot and I really enjoyed working with him. I thought he was very eloquent when it came to speaking with clients, at least from the calls that I've heard. So I said all of these things, and then I communicated the fact that I'd received another opportunity and that I was planning to start the next month, and that I was planning to hand in my 2 weeks notice that week. And also, if the conversation goes well, just say, like, do you mind if I reach out to you from time to time? I would love to keep in touch. I'll make sure to note down your contact details so that we can keep in touch in the future. My managing director, when I was on the phone with him, one of them said, you know, he's kept in touch with his juniors. He's always stood by the viewpoint to always care about whether the juniors are happy, you know, if they're getting enough sleep and all of that. And he was saying, you know, I didn't realize the impact of that until I became my junior's client, because they had gone to huge private equity firms and had now become a client of his. So he's very appreciative of that. This doesn't only just apply to the professional world, but I remember something that one of my friends had said in the past, and it just has stuck with me for a long time. But she said something along the lines of the world is too small to not at least be on neutral terms with everyone. You never know when these people will cross paths with you again. And even if for whatever reason there was some conflict or friction and you're not the biggest fan of someone who you're working with, if there's a very clear way for you to end things on a positive note, then it's probably a good idea to proceed forward with that, as you never know who may come back into your life later down the road. All in all, just don't act prematurely. Make sure everything is in place and that there will be no obstacles that would impede you or hinder you from moving on to your next role.